John, the streak is over. The biggest favorite of the week did the unthinkable in week 4 and won outright. In addition to covering, we might start to get some more favorites into the mix. You know, the public still got killed last week, but not quite to the same degree as the first 3 weeks of the season. We're starting to see things come around. I will note, though, however, that NFL dogs of 5.5 or more are now 17-4-1 against the number this season. Those teams are 11-11 straight up. But John, the 49ers came through for you last week. You took the points with the Niners, took them at a double-digit spread, our first double-digit spread of the week, and they got it done.
They sure did. It was more just a bet against the New England having to travel that far. And, this was a 49ers team that, yes, famously shorthanded at this stage, but even still returning home, kind of needing a win in that spot after a couple of back-to-back disappointing losses on the road. I thought that some home cooking would help them, and frankly, it was just a spot where the Patriots offense I did not project them to be able to keep up. They did not, and therefore that one came in pretty nicely. So that was a good way to break that trend where the big dogs had been barking a little bit too loud and needed to be put back in the crate for a second.
Yeah, man, I wanted to give you a pat on the back. You hit all 3 of the games you featured last week. San Francisco, Detroit, and Cincinnati all came through for you. I went 1-1-1, so nothing to brag about there, but had a nice day on Sunday in terms of the props. Hit 20 out of 25 of the prop plays on Underdog and on DraftKings, so we'd love to see that. Before we dive in on our 6 games that we want to discuss here, John, Davante Adams, as you may have heard, has requested a trade. I don't know if he officially requested one last season, but it kind of feels like a redux of what we went through with Davante in 2023. DraftKings has some Davante Adams next team odds up right now. The New York Jets are -110, unsurprisingly. The New Orleans Saints, the other team that Davante himself is rumored to be pushing for, along with the Jets, they're at 3-1. Steelers +450, Commanders 8-1, Cowboys 8-1, Chiefs 12-1, Niners 16-1, Bills 16-1, and your Baltimore Ravens 16-1. It feels like the Jets and the Saints are the front runners here, although Davante Adams does not have a no trade clause. He can't exactly force his way to any specific team. Which of these is intriguing to you, either from a betting perspective or just a pure NFL fun perspective? Like, where do you want to see Davante Adams wind up?
Well, I think that the summer was a little bit instructive in the sense that the Steelers were very much rumored to be in the Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes, right? And they were unable to get that deal done. Ayuk, of course, re-signing with the 49ers, but I still think even in an Arthur Smith offense that is not putting it in the air a ton, and they don't have the quarterback personnel to really have an offense quite like that. So this would probably not be something that Adams was overly stoked about going. But I think, joining a team that's doing well right now in the Steelers would make a lot of sense. They really are lacking some punch opposite George Pickens. I think that Adams would be a nice fit there. And it seems like, given all the, kind of trade, like railroad tracks that were paved with the Niners and the Steelers over the summer, and why that would have made sense, I think that those same things kind of apply here with Adams. So obviously there's some favorites, they're third in line, the Steelers are, but I think at +450, I have some interest because the fit would make so much sense for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, it probably makes more sense for Pittsburgh maybe than it does Davante. It's like, I don't know if he's signing up to go from Gardner Minshew to Justin Fields, although Fields threw the ball well last week against the Colts, but probably not the quarterback who I would imagine would be at the top of his list. But if he's looking to get to a more competitive situation, I think Pittsburgh certainly would be fascinating, would completely change the scope of what's ultimately a pretty limited offense right now. I think by far the most fun scenario, John, maybe other than the Chiefs or the Bills, because, that's kind of the over the top, like that's almost an NBA style trade, where a title contender brings in somebody like Davante Adams. But I think from a pure fun perspective, how about the Commanders at 8-1, another team that was sniffing around Brandon Ayuk?
I love that. It's been great to see Terry McLaurin kind of get himself on track, and even still, they definitely need some established depth. And Adams, of course, qualifies as more than that. I think the offense would officially be scary at that point. I mean, it's already kind of scary right now with Daniels back there as a trigger man. I mean, he's been unbelievable, especially over the last few weeks. And, adding Adams to that, a crisp route runner with great hands, the way that he would challenge defenses. And then you get McLaurin over the top. I mean, man, Washington would all of a sudden, I think, legitimate NFC East considerations beyond just, oh, isn't it fun that they are atop the leaderboard after 1 month?
And that's the thing. It feels like that division is pretty gettable right now, especially if Dallas were to lose to the Steelers this week. I mean, who knows what's going on with Philly? They're on bye in week 5. And I have a sneaking suspicion that we may talk more about this Commanders team later in the show. But let's get to the board, John. We're each taking 3 games that we want to discuss. We'll talk through them. We'll settle on an official pick on each of these games. As always, I'll let you lead it off. Where are we going first?
All right, we will start with the ugliest game of the week. So it can't get worse from here, folks. Trust me on this one. We're going to go to Foxborough. It's going to be the Patriots against the Dolphins. Earlier in the week, going into the Monday Night Football, the Dolphins were slight road favorites. That has changed. The Patriots now favored by a point in this one. I think I'm more interested in the total than the spread, although I do like the Patriots -1 for the record. But okay, so the total 36.5. How do you go under that? I mean, that's like a service academy game level of a total, but I think we have a pretty good glimpse now of what this Dolphins offense looks like without Tua, and we have a pretty good idea of what the Patriots offense looks like under Jacoby Brissett. So therefore, I mean, this is a setup where the two teams combined are averaging 24.3 points per game. I just don't envision a scenario in which the Dolphins are challenging for 17 points even. And, in a game that's expected to be close, I think that this one, it just feels like a 14-13 type of game where the under is almost never threatened or the over is never threatening in this one. So again, very skeptical of both offenses here between the Dolphins and the Patriots. And you know what? It's low, the total. I'm going lower.
I can't fight you on that, man. I think this total could be at like 31.5. And, even at that point, it would be a 50-50 for me. I mean, these are the 2 worst offenses in the NFL by a lot of metrics right now. Miami is the worst, which says a lot because, obviously they're down Tua, but I've been a little disappointed in Mike McDaniel, to be honest, not being able to scheme anything up with either Skylar Thompson or Tyler Huntley. And I know we're asking a lot here, right? They brought Tyler Huntley in off the street 2 weeks ago, but we saw Matt LaFleur, conjure up some pretty nice game plans, one of which came against that Titans team that Miami couldn't do anything against on Monday night. And, we've seen Tyler Huntley play some capable football in the past, and he looked completely lost. The Dolphins look completely lost. I mean, they have more interceptions than passing touchdowns on the year. They've only made 9 trips to the red zone all season long. I mean, they're not even threatening to score. So I'm certainly not going to fight you, John, on taking the under on what's a low total at 36.5. For my first game, we're heading out west, John. We're looking at the Seattle Seahawks, who are currently 6-point home favorites for the New York Giants. You can find that one at DraftKings. There are some 6.5s out there as well. But, I think at first glance, you look at this as maybe a rough schedule spot for Seattle. Yes, they are at home, but they played on Monday night on the road in Detroit. So short week. The Giants, of course, played on Thursday against Dallas. So they do have a significant rest advantage here. But I don't know how much that really matters. Favorites on short rest, playing a team on extended rest, are 43-13-1 straight up, 31-26 against the spread over the last 20 years. That per the Action Network, that number jumps to 19-15 against the number as a favorite of more than 4 points. So maybe not quite as bad of a schedule spot as you might think for Seattle. I also think there's a reasonable chance that Malik Neighbors does not play in this game. He's dealing with a concussion. Again, that happened on Thursday, but the indication, as of Wednesday is that, the Giants said they're going to take it slow. I don't think they're going to force Malik Neighbors back in. Devin Singletary is also banged up. If Malik Neighbors plays, this is probably a pass for me. That's just how important I think he is to this Giants offense. I mean, if you watch the Giants at all, they run everything through Malik Neighbors and to a lesser degree, Wan'Dale Robinson. Yes, Seattle's a little bit banged up on defense. They saw some major regression on Monday night against Detroit, as you might expect. They were getting some good turnover luck through the first 3 weeks. And perhaps more importantly, they were playing terrible quarterbacks in each of their first 3 games. But I don't know that I'm ready to buy in on this Giants offense. I think a lot of things went their way against Dallas. They were able to control the clock, control time of possession. I don't think you're doing that against Seattle. And, I think the Seahawks have demonstrated enough offensive firepower. If DK Metcalf doesn't lose that fumble early in that game, I think we're just going score for score the rest of the way. That puts Seattle in kind of this 2-score hole where they had to play a little bit more desperate. They had some calls go against them at the end of the Detroit game, but all in all, and when you factor in the level up in competition, the level up in terms of quarterback play compared to who they had faced, I still came away pretty impressed with Seattle. Obviously, you have some questions about the defense, but if Malik Neighbors is not out there for the Giants, I'm not sure that matters. So if this stays under 6.5, 7, I like Seattle this week.
Yeah, the theme again with the Seahawks is they've done great against bad quarterbacks, and Daniel Jones, Sands, Malik Neighbors probably qualifies as that. And yes, like, the rest advantage for the Giants is like an interesting thing to consider, but like you said, big favorites on short rest actually do perform pretty well on balance, and Seattle generally is a good team against the spread at home, and Geno Smith as well. So I definitely like the Seahawks in this spot if this hangs at 6. This is a Giants team that I think is scrappy. They're reasonably well coached and all that, but I think the talent advantage is decidedly on the Seahawks side, and I think that they're pretty well coached for their own part. I think McDonald's doing a really nice job to get started out there. So I'm with you here. I'm riding the Seahawks.
I also think it matters to have Ken Walker back. I mean, all due respect to Zach Charbonnet, but I mean, Walker is a beast, man. He looks better than he has at any point in his career, and I think he's on the short list of backs who really do matter for me. All right, so we like Seattle. We like the under in that Miami-New England game. Where are we going next, John? Do we have a dog that we want to identify?
We do have a dog. That dog lives in Houston. The Houston Texans are 1.5-point underdogs against the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, I still like, my opinion of the Bills doesn't really change too much from Sunday night. And I think that the way in which the Texans are going to have to go against the Bills on defense, it's not going to look the same as the Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry offense. So, I mean, those issues that Buffalo has against the run, they won't get exposed the same way this week. But still, you're getting points with CJ Stroud. You're getting a team in Buffalo that is short rest, road week for the second week in a row. I think that's tough. Von Miller obviously suspended for this one, and there's some injury report stuff that you're gonna have to keep an eye on when it comes to the Bills as well. So I think the Texans are in a nice spot here. I think that as home underdogs, I've been a long-standing believer of this Houston team since Stroud came aboard. Looked amazing last year, of course, and I think that things are clicking thus far. It's going to be a tough game. I mean, it's arguably the game of the week, huge AFC seeding implications for this point of the season. But yeah, I'm on the Texans as home dogs. And traditionally, Stroud has performed well in these spots.
Yeah, CJ Stroud 6-3 against the spread as an underdog in his short NFL career. This one is more of a stay away for me. I think it's really easy to look at Buffalo and say, all right, this is the ultimate bounce back spot. Houston's looked a little shaky. Some of the injuries for the Texans do concern me. Joe Mixon did not practice on Wednesday. Laramie Tunsil got banged up last week. This is also a team that's just been crushed by penalties, it feels like, on a weekly basis. And they were able to survive that because they played the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. But that was, obviously a plus matchup for Houston. For what it's worth, a lot of money coming in on the Bills, John. The public loves the Bills. 80% of the money as of Wednesday afternoon coming in on the Buffalo Bills as slight favorites on the road. My second game, John, we're going back to the well on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think I've talked about the Steelers every single week on this video, and I like them again. They're 1.5-point home favorites against the Dallas Cowboys, and this is a banged up Dallas Cowboys outfit. No Micah Parsons, no DeMarcus Lawrence. As I mentioned earlier, we saw the Giants, move the ball pretty effectively on Dallas. A lot of short throws, but they were able to convert third down after third down. They dominated time of possession in that game. Were able to keep the Dallas offense off the field for the most part. And part of the reason that Dallas is struggling in that area is they can outrun the ball. They can outrun the ball whatsoever. They're bottom 3 in just about every rushing metric you could find. We did see some cracks in that Pittsburgh defense last week against the Colts. I think they were just completely unprepared to see Joe Flacco. We're going to chalk up the loss on that one to the fact that Anthony Richardson didn't stay in the game long enough to commit like 3 egregious turnovers. But they're not going to be caught off guard this week. And I think this is going to continue to put Dallas in a really tough spot. I don't care who the opponent is. When you can't run the ball, I mean, when the defense knows you're going to throw like 75, 80% of the time, it's really, really hard to go out and win games in the NFL, especially, against a good defense on the road. Dallas also is having trouble stopping the run. Second highest EPA per carry on the ground allowed this season. Pittsburgh offensive line is a little bit banged up, so maybe there is something that offsets there, but I think this is a TJ Watt game. I think it's a Pittsburgh defense game. Cowboys offensive line was terrible against the Giants. Guyton had like 4 holding calls. I don't know if that changes week over week. And the other thing is here, John, can the Cowboys get over 20 points? That is the key to beating a Justin Fields team. Justin Fields 0-22 straight up as a starter when the opponent scores more than 20 points. So we are putting our faith in the Pittsburgh Steelers defense here. We're also putting our faith in Dak Prescott continuing to struggle as a dog, 1-8 against the number in his last 9 starts as an underdog.
Yeah, I definitely like the Steelers here as well. Last week, pretty anomalous, their game in Indianapolis. And yet, I think the big thing for me is those lingering injuries that Dallas suffered late in the game between Lawrence and Micah Parsons. So that's just really tricky for them. The defense had already kind of not been playing great with those guys. So it's not going to look better without them, I wouldn't imagine. And when the Dallas on the other side is as one-dimensional as we expect them to be, yeah, that TJ Watt and company licking their chops. And this is a Dallas offensive line that I think has a bit more of reputation than actual quality play, at least in recent seasons. I think it's still kind of riding high from like the Zeke Elliott rookie season almost. It feels like they're still getting credit for that almost a decade later. So it ain't the same. It just isn't. I like the Steelers here.
All right, there we have it. Steelers are in the bank, John. Let's go to your third and final game. Where are you taking us?
All right, so whereas I was fading the public previously, I'm getting real public with this one. Just like everyone else probably listening to this, very much enjoying the Commanders' run. So I think that this Commanders-Browns game is really catching my eye. I love the Commanders as 3-point favorites in this one against Cleveland. Secondly, I mean, I do love betting against the Browns. That's going to be a well that I'm going to early and often throughout the course of this season. They feel kind of lifeless at this stage. I know that Amari Cooper has been rumored as a guy, potentially for the Chiefs, depending on the Rashee Rice situation. I think that the Commanders, that passing attack is one of the toughest, if not the toughest, that the Browns will have faced to this point in the season. They're at home after a couple weeks on the road here, coming back gloriously. So, I mean, I could see someone being like, okay, there's too much going in Washington's favor here. So this could be a hold your nose spot. And if you can get Cleveland at 3.5, I can understand that to an extent, but this could just be another really long game for the Browns, who are unable to keep up on the scoreboard if Washington's scoring like I expect them to. The run game isn't pristine for this Washington outfit, but when Jaden Daniels doesn't have incompletions, does that really matter all that much? So give me the Commanders here.
This is a line that really jumped out to me as a strange one this week, right? Given the direction of these two teams, given the kind of recent reputation of these teams, like I'm surprised that this is still hanging around at 3. I mean, Washington is at home here. It's like this feels like they could be like a 2.5, 3-point favorite on the road against the Browns. And that does scare me a little bit. When you see a suspicious line, sometimes you do want to back away. I think the big question is, when is the regression coming, if ever, for the Commanders offense? Like, Jane Daniels is not going to complete 80% of his passes the rest of the season. I think the counter to that is we went through a very similar questioning and exercise with CJ Stroud last year, right? Where he started hitting his stride around this time, and you're like, all right, how many rookie quarterbacks could keep this up? And he got better and better as the season went along. What scares me is it feels like Daniels can't get any better. It's like he's played 2 perfect games essentially back to back. And, it kind of depends on how much you respect the Browns defense, because I don't know that the Browns are going to be able to score, even on what's a terrible Washington defense, although a Washington defense that was able to hold down the Arizona Cardinals last week. I mean, it looked like we were going to be set for a shootout, and, Arizona comes out, they score a touchdown on their first drive, and they get really nothing until putting essentially a garbage time touchdown on the board in the second half. I mean, Cleveland has scored 17, 18, 15, and 16 points so far through 4 games. And, it's not like the Dallas defense looks all that scary. One of those games was against the Giants. They got a defensive touchdown last week against the Raiders and still only got to 16.
It's miserable watching Cleveland right now. They, you can go back to week 1 against the Cowboys, and they got, their doors blown off at home. And it's just, that Jaguars game, I think we both wish to forget that one, and it just still hasn't been pretty since then. They lose outright to the Giants when they were set up beautifully. And, last week going the way that it did, with a game that, I'm sure NFL Films wants to kind of like delete from its collection. Not a great game between them and the Raiders. So I'm sticking with it. I know that, it's a little bit fishy to see a line that you probably, if you're just kind of making the lines up in your head, you're like, oh, Washington 4.5, something like that. And it's significantly lower than that. It gives you pause, but I'm going to like hit the override button on gambling brain here and just go with what my eyes tell me. That's Washington.
All right, for my third and final game, John, I do want to tell you I considered the Denver Broncos as a 1.5 point home favorite against Vegas. I can't buy in on Bo Nix. I hate what I'm seeing from Bo Nix. I don't know how the Broncos have 2 wins. It's unfathomable that one of those 2 teams is going to be 3-2 coming out of that matchup. So that one ended up sticking as a stay away. I was very tempted to take the Indianapolis Colts +3 at Jacksonville. You talk about following what your eyes have told you. The fact that the Jags are a 3-point favorite to me is putting a lot of faith in the backs against the wall narrative. I know there's injuries for the Colts, but I'm staying far, far away from that one. John, the game I want to discuss, though, is actually taking place in London, England. The Vikings and the Jets. Minnesota, a 2.5 point favorite. The question I have here is similar to what we talked about with Washington. Is this the regression spot for the Vikings? Because everything is telling me that the Vikings have looked like the much better team. They're number 1 in defensive DVOA. Sam Darnold continues to look bulletproof. They have the best weapon in this game in Justin Jefferson. We continue to see Garrett Wilson put up like 4 for 45 stat lines every week. Breece Hall, barely was in positive yardage last week against the Denver Broncos. Am I overly eager on the Minnesota Vikings? Because I don't know that I can get myself to hold my nose and take the Jets here.
I don't know if I can either. I mean, the Jets have basically played one very impressive game against a not very impressive opponent. And I think the Vikings at this stage, a month into the season, certainly qualify as being extremely impressive. And it's not just the record, it's the metrics that back it up. You mentioned in our show notes that Aaron Rodgers hasn't seen a Brian Flores defense before in his career. That feels problematic because Brian Flores has routinely put quarterbacks into a pretzel since taking over as DC there in Minnesota. So this is a tricky spot. And I think if you're the Jets, you want to get bailed out by the run game a little bit if the pass game isn't working, but the offensive line itself has been pretty banged up and pretty shoddy, I think, through the opening month of the season as well. So 2.5, it's similar to the Commanders where you want to take it so badly because you believe in those teams and the just kind of current trajectories of their opponents both. It's like it makes you feel even better about it. But I know international games can get a little funky here, but I think favorites tend to fare pretty well overseas, and I think that we see that continue in this spot. So I'm a believer in Sam Darnold. Little revenge game.
It just feels like this can't keep happening for the Vikings, and that's a tough narrative to translate to the betting brain. Where it's like how many teams that have a preseason win total of 6.5 are on pace to smash that and start the season 5-0. It doesn't happen very often, right? I saw a good note earlier today that like the most similar situation to what we're seeing with Minnesota was like the 99 Rams, who of course went all the way to the Super Bowl. And it's so hard to imagine that continuing, but I keep coming back to who the Vikings have done this against, right? After week 1, you're like, all right, it's the Giants, whatever. This isn't going to continue. Then they take it to the Niners. Then they blow out the Texans. Then they're up 28-0 on the Green Bay Packers. It's like, I don't know what else you really need to see here. There is the international element, which like you said, has favored the favorites in recent years, but going on the road, then going international, it's not a great travel spot. I don't want to make a vibes bet, John, but the vibes just don't seem good right now for the New York Jets. And I think if Brian Flores can succeed in once again, taking Garrett Wilson out of a game, which feels like it's happening more often than not, the Vikings don't have a Pat Surtain shutdown corner that you could just throw on him. But if you could limit Garrett Wilson, it's like this becomes a pretty barren offense pretty quickly. Yeah,
Aaron Rodgers does a great job of taking Garrett Wilson out of the game already. Yeah. So you stack on like a really well schemed defensive game plan on top of that, and this could be a really frustrating day yet again for Wilson and those who invested a first round pick in fantasy. But all told, this Vikings offense is humming. I think that the Jets defense isn't quite as good as what we saw from it a year ago, and the Jets offense is kind of what one speed at this point, and the run game not really working. Although we'll get to that in the props here, but all things considered here, you add it all up, and I feel like the Vikings are the side here.
All right, you alluded to it, John. Let's get to some of our favorite props for Week 5. I'll let you lead us off. What do you like?
All right, so I've got three for us this week that I felt good enough to say on camera. Give me a Brandon Ayuk anytime touchdown. I like the number on that one, plus 145 against the Cardinals. Cardinals. I still think the Cardinals are frisky and all that, but I'm not so certain that they're going to be able to hang in this particular spot. And I think that Ayuk, I think basically it's coming for him eventually. You know, I think that he's too talented to be held out of the end zone for too much longer.
All right, what else you got beyond Ayuk?
I do, despite kind of having not so nice things to say about the Jets and the offensive line and everything, I don't think it definitely can't be as bad for Breece Hall this week as it was a week ago, where, you know, he's held, I believe, under 5 rushing yards. I think that this is a good time to buy the dip, as it were, where, you know, we're seeing his prop at 49.5. He hit the over on that in his other 3 games coming into last week. So I think that corrects. I think that they will be able to run the ball a little bit in this spot, and I think they need to, first of all. But I do think that Hall at a gettable number like 49.5 is something that I'm interested in. Then a little Thursday one for you. I like the under on Cade Otton's receptions prop, 3.5. I know he's been, up and down as far as his involvement. His up weeks, is certainly going to put him past this. I think that the safety personnel that the Atlanta Falcons have is going to be really tough for tight end production all season long. And, that's something that I'm going to continue to kind of try to target with these props here. And Cade Otton's just, his numbers up this week. You got Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons. I think that's a tough matchup for him. So give me the under 3.5 for Cade Otton.
All right. We like those. I like Justin Fields anytime touchdown this week against Dallas. I've already spoken on Pittsburgh winning that game and covering, plus 190 for Justin Fields to find his way into the end zone. Pittsburgh struggled to get the backs going. I think they're going to have to use Justin Fields as a runner, as they did last week when he got into the end zone twice against the Colts. So I like that one at plus 190. Aaron Jones, anytime touchdown at plus 105. And if you want to get saucy and take the first touchdown, be my guest, but I'll take the anytime at plus 105. He's near the top of the league in terms of red zone carries. He has 9 carries inside the 10-yard line, 6 carries inside the 5 already this season. He's only scored on one of those. So the opportunity has been there. He's gone down at the 1 or 2 yard line like 5 times already. I think he breaks through this week, plus 105. CeeDee Lamb, anytime touchdown, plus 100. It's a 2-man offense right now in Dallas. Unless they trade for Devontae Adams, that's not changing anytime soon. I think it's going to be a pass-heavy script for Dallas. I like Andy Dalton under 217.5 passing yards against what's still a very, very good Chicago Bears defense. We don't talk about the defense because everybody wants to, just go on and on about Caleb Williams. But Andy Dalton only had 220 passing yards on 40 attempts last week against a bad Cincinnati defense that's given up yards to anybody who wants them. I think this is a comeback down to earth spot for that Carolina passing game in particular. So we like the under 217.5. Derrick Henry, I think this is a good spot for him, getting that Cincinnati defense this week. 90 plus rushing yards at plus 110. And Jaden Reed, longest reception over 24.5. So we're going a little niche here, but Jaden Reed in the 2 games that he's played with Jordan Love this season has 6 catches already that have gone for at least 20 yards.